Okay, let's conclude this 2018 K Economics Unit 2 paper. So today we're going to do the question 3. All right, so let's get ourselves organized, and the clock has begun to tick. So let's get on with it. All right, so the first question was to state 2 reasons why nations trade. Right, so we're talking about international trade. So what we do know is that some countries are not endowed, in other words, they were not gifted with the natural resources, with some, these kind of natural resources like petroleum, water, natural gas, even sunshine, to meet the needs of their citizens. All right, so obviously they will have to buy them from somebody who got them. Another reason could be that some countries do not have the capital or the technology, like here in the Caribbean, right? You don't have the capital or the technology to produce the goods that are possible from your own resources. So you got the resources like bauxite and all that sort of stuff, but you ain't got the money nor the technology to convert it into its final product. Of course, we could talk about some countries cannot produce the goods that their citizens demand because of the geographical location. Like, in the Caribbean, we like, for example, we like a lot of temperate fruits like English apple and that sort of stuff, right? But we can't produce them ourselves, so we will have to import them, all right? Okay, the second part of the question, part B, says outline one major component of the current account in the balance of payments, right? So just looking for one thing you would expect to find on the balance of payments. All right, so one component is the net trade in merchandise goods, right? No, tangible goods, in other words, because this would indicate whether the exports. So in your current account, it would tell you whether your exports of these tangible goods, right, exceeds the importation of tangible goods, right? Because solid goods that you can hold and touch on that, right? So that's one component from your current company. It tells you about the difference in trade in goods. Of course, we could have mentioned net trade in the intangibles like the services, right? Or investments from abroad, or even unrequited transfers, right? We could have mentioned any of those components. Okay, so moving along. All right, so part B2 says explain how the official reserves account is used in the balance of payments. Now, if you recall, a balance of payments has 3 accounts, right? The current account, which is the major account, capital account, and the official reserves account, which is where you sort of finance your deficits or whatever you have, right? So the official reserves account then registers the foreign currencies and securities held by the state, right, by the government. And this is through the central bank. And it is used to make payments on debts incurred by the state from year to year. Or you could write it like, um, if there's disequilibrium in the balance of payments due to charges in the reserves, the government will borrow money and place it in the official reserves account to boost that account. And of course, if it's a case where you have surpluses, then the government will use the money in those reserves account, in that reserve account, to finance new investments or even pay the principal payments on loans for which they were currently only paying interest. All right, so, all right, 3C. Explain the effects of import tariffs on each of the following. So the first one was consumers of the importing countries. In other words, was the impact of this tariff on the people who like to import goods, right? So, an import tariff, like most taxes, it will make the price of those imported foreign goods more expensive. And what that would do is that it will reduce demand for such imports and force the consumers to seek domestic alternatives. See, that's what the government will want to happen, right? That you start importing the goods and find some local substitute for what you wanted. But what may happen is that the consumers may switch to foreign substitutes that are at the pre-tariff price, and so defeat the whole objective of you setting this import tariff anyhow, right? So in other words, by the time when you put in this tariff to raise the price of, say, Apple phones to $5,000, and a person is ambivalent between an Apple and a Samsung, and the Samsung selling at 1,000, the person is, well, I could buy a Samsung. So they ain't making an effort to buy nothing local. You might be selling a local brand called Tululi, right? But nobody interested in it. All right, so you defeat the whole purpose of placing a tariff. But technically speaking, the tariff was supposed to reduce demand for import goods and increase the demand for local goods. All right, sorry about the diversion. 3C says explain the effects of import tariffs now on the producers from the importing countries. So in other words, we look at the consumers just now, we gotta look at the producers. In other words, those companies that got buy their inputs from abroad. So an import tariff, therefore, will require these local producers to access more money, in other words, get more foreign reserves to purchase these imported goods. And this will cause the price of output to rise, in other words, the finished product to rise, especially if the producers have no intent or cannot contain the increase in the price due to the tariff. So therefore, this tariff might then impede production, especially if you can find a local input substitute. So therefore, there will be a decline in national output and hence an increase in unemployment because the producers will have to lay off some people to keep themselves afloat. All right, so 3D says analyze 3 consequences of balance of payment disequilibrium. In other words, the balance of payment imbalance, and you want to know what's the cause of this, right? What's the consequence of this? Not the cause, what's the consequence of your balance of payments not balancing? Okay, well, just to be clear, balance of payments disequilibrium exists where the outflows of in other words, outflows of reserves to foreign countries are not equal to the inflows of foreign reserves from foreign countries. In other words, you're spending more than you're earning. So what will happen then is that this equilibrium would impact the foreign reserves, obviously, because if the BOP is in deficit, then the state needs to borrow money to improve the reserves, and therefore to pay its debts. So if on the other hand, though, that BOP has a surplus, then those reserves may be used to acquire more capital assets to improve the national output. So surely, any disequilibrium could be negative or positive. If it's negative, you gotta borrow the money. If it's positive, you're gonna use up what you got to try to improve on where you're at. So that's one consequence, which is the impact on the foreign reserves. Okay, another consequence is that it may result in import inflation. You see, because if your country was import dependent, like most countries in the Caribbean, right, it means that you're subjected to any inflation or any increase in prices in those foreign markets, right? So when their prices go up, so will yours, or the possibility of you getting these goods will be reduced. So it says if you're import dependent, then a price increase in the foreign markets would worsen your deficit because now you gotta find more reserves. Not you, the state has to find more foreign reserves to pay for any imported goods that you are seeking. All right. A third consequence will be your inability to attract foreign direct investment, because a persistent deficit outside that, in other words, if deficit is outside of the government's control, right, is going to deter potential investors, whether they're local or foreign, right, from building up the capital stock in the country. And therefore, the economy, and one of the reasons would be, I should say, is that if this deficit persists, that people are going to perceive that your economy is weak, right, or is poorly managed, and therefore they're not taking the risk to lose their money because you can't manage this economy. All right, so those are our three reasons. I mean, you could come with more. As I said, remember what I said, that these are just guideline answers. Even what you write about these three, you could expand on them a little bit, but it's all up to you. But I'm just here to give you some guidelines on how you could proceed with answering the questions. Well, at this point, I think I would like to thank Screencast for allowing me um, this opportunity to actually record a video, and so that you can learn something from what I do. So kudos to them, and may they continue from strength to strength. So that's the end of that question. It's also the end of the paper. So until the next question paper, keep on revising.